Okay, so this was actually technically example number 2 because I forgot to record, but you'll have all the rest of them coming forward. Are you done, Pfeiffer?
Yes.
Awesome. Next example. This one is 2 times the square root of 1 minus 11x equals 20. Okay, so this brings up the question. We know we have to square to get rid of the square root, but there's a 2 on the front, and that kind of throws me off a little bit. So my suggestion is actually to get rid of the 2 before we square. So my rule is that I typically like the radical or the square root sign to have nothing in front of it when I start to square it. So how would I get rid of that 2 that's in front of it right now? Divide it, because right now that's 2 times the square root, and to get rid of multiplication we have to divide. So we're going to divide both sides by 2. These 2's are going to cancel, and I'm going to be left with the square root of 1 minus 11x equals 20 over 2, which is 10. And now I can square both sides. When I square the left, what happens to the radical? It cancels with the square. So I'm left with 1 minus 11x equals 10 squared, which is 100. Now we can subtract the 1 over. And I'm left with negative 11x equals 100 minus 1, which is 99. Madison, what do I do next? Divide the negative 11. And I get x equals what? Negative 9. How do we feel so far? Okay-ish? Ish, maybe. We're going to do a couple more for sure.
I know this is going on.
No, this is going on this quarter. Oh, the quiz will go on next quarter. Yes. This homework, though, will go on this quarter. Square root of 2p equals p. Go ahead and solve this one, or start to solve it on your own.
I was genuinely confused myself for a second.
Kaylee, what am I going to do?
Divide by 2.
I can't divide by 2 because the 2's inside. We only do that if it's outside. So what am I going to do instead? I want to get rid of the square root. So how do I get rid of a square root? What did we do on the previous problem that canceled out my square root? So we square it all, right?
Yeah.
So a square cancels out a square root. What we do to one side, we have to do to the other. So the square and the square root cancel, leaving just the 2p. And then my right side becomes p squared. Yes, Pfeiffer. What do you mean subtract p's? That one you can't do. No, that's only for dividing. Okay, so what we're going to do is I notice I have a p on both sides of the equal sign. That's really not going to work for me. So I need to get everything on one side of the equal sign if I have more than one variable. So I'm going to subtract this 2p over. And I'm going to get 0 equals p squared minus 2p.
I don't like to look at that. It says equal to 0.
Which is the same as p p squared minus 2p plus 0, which means I can do the quadratic formula to solve this.
No, I wanted to.
So if we are left with a quadratic, we must use the quadratic formula to finish it out. So in case you can't remember what the quadratic formula is, negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a, where the a, the b, and the c come from these numbers.
Grady, the more use this information.
My a is equal to 1, my b is equal to negative 2, and my c is equal to 0 here. So go ahead and plug those into the quadratic formula and work it out. We're not going to have complex numbers, no. It should come out to actual real numbers. You did, we're sure. You did the quadratic formula already? Did you get it? You just copied it. Okay. Okay, that's fine, as long as you actually did it too. So when you do the quadratic formula and work it out, you should end up with 2 plus or minus the square root of 4 all over 2. Square root of 4 is 2, which leaves us with 2 plus or minus 2 over 2. Split that into two problems. 2 plus 2 is 4 over 2 is 2. 2 minus 2 is 0 over 2 is 0. So the two answers you should get are 2 and 0. Show of hands who got those answers. Both of those are your answer, and they should go in curly brackets. So P is equal to 0 and 2. Which 4?
Because
This one? Negative 2 squared is 4. Right, and then 4 times 1 times 0 is 0. So I'll give you guys a second if you're not finished with the quadratic formula to finish working through that. And then we'll do the next example. We are probably just going to do 3 examples more, and then we're done.
we zoom in the homework, there's only one, most one that requires the quadratic.
I don't know if there are or not. I hope there's only a couple.
Because normally you do like 2 each, unless it's like really easy to forward.
Right. Okay, let's go ahead and write the next example. Oh, sorry. So we have the square root of 10x plus 6 plus 10 equals 18. Who has an idea of how I'm going to start to solve this? Carly, awesome. Subtract the 10. Then I'm left with the square root of 10n plus 6 equals 18 minus 10, which is 8. Ariana, what am I going to do next?
Hold on.
Okay, yeah, sorry, I'll give you a second.
Do the square root thing, put the 2, you know.
Squaring,
Yeah,
right?
square.
I'm going to square both sides so that I can cancel out the square on the left, or the square root, sorry, on the left. Square and a square root cancel, leaving 10n plus 6 equals 8 squared, which is 64. What next? Subtract the 6. I get 10n equals 58. And then what am I gonna do, Pfeiffer? Nope, there's no square here. I don't have to do a quadratic formula. I'm gonna divide by 10. I never once said that we were gonna get nice, beautiful whole numbers for all of this. No, no decimal. So I have 58 over 10, both of which are even. So I can divide 2 out of each of them. And when I do, I get 29 over 5, and that is my answer. I want fractions, but I want reduced fractions if it comes out that way. That's not reduced all the way.
It's
You're gonna
the.
make it so I were
Are there any questions on that one? I do believe majority of the homework works out to nice numbers, but it's not a guarantee. So you should be comfortable if you're given something as ugly as 58 over 10. And you should be confident that you can reduce them by dividing out a common factor. Okay. No. Okay, we're gonna do 2 more and then we're finished for today. So we have the square root of 3v plus 11 equals the square root of negative 4 minus 2v. Emily, what am I gonna do? Square what?
The 2.
Both of them. So both sides of my equal sign. Why did you decide that we're gonna square it?
It's already getting square root.
And I need to cancel out the roots. Good. So a square and a square root cancels, leaving just what's underneath, which is 3v plus 11 equals negative 4 minus 2v. Grant, what will I do next? Huh? Okay. And how am I going to move it over? Good. Then I get 3v equals negative 15 minus 2v. Am I finished, Grant, or can I do more? What can I do? How do I move it? Addition, good. So I'm going to add 2v to both sides. When I do, I get 5v equals negative 15. And then what do I do? Anybody? Divide by 5. And we get v equals negative 3. Try it. Questions, concerns, or issues so far? Are we okay with that? We're going to do 1 more, and then I'm going to turn you loose on your homework. I will say the next one is probably the hardest that it gets. For today, but I do think it rivals tomorrow's as well.
That's not a good thing.
Okay. So this is the last one we're going to do today, and it is 2 plus the square root of 3 minus v, or sorry, 3 minus x, equals the square root of 7 minus x.
I don't like that.
Why don't you like that, Pfeiffer?
Because now you have that whole
Okay, I have a whole number in front of a radical, and I can't move it, because even if I move it, it's going to be grouped with a radical somewhere. So that means that I'm going to have to do something we've avoided so far today. And that means I'm going to end up foiling in here somewhere. So what's the only thing I can do to get rid of my radicals? I can square it. But when we square that left side, because we have to square the whole thing, we're squaring the 2 plus the radical. which means that this is gonna have to be written twice and then foiled out to get its simplified form. On the right, it's gonna look beautiful because the square and the square root are gonna cancel just like normal. So what this turns into is 2 plus the square root of 3 minus x times 2 plus the square root of 3 minus x equals 7 minus x. So the right side looks wonderful. It's the left side we're gonna have to work on.
So would you say that
Square it and then foil, yes. So then we just start squaring. I'm gonna color code so you can see what's happening. So I start with green.
you're gonna have to slow down for this one.
Okay,
Like you just talked about like how fast you're going,
okay, I will try. So we do the first terms because that's what FOIL starts with is F. My first terms in each parentheses are 2 and 2. So I do 2 times 2 to get 4. Then I do my outside terms. That's what the O stands for. So that's going to be 2 times the square root of 3 minus x. And it's literally just written as 2 times the square root of 3 minus x. Then we do the I, which is the inside. And that's going to be the square root of 3 minus x times 2. That 2 is positive and so is the radical. So it's plus the square root of 3 minus x. And then we do the L, which is our last terms in each parentheses, which is the square root of 3 minus x times the square root of 3 minus x. What's going to happen there? The roots are going to cancel, actually. So this is the same as the square root of 3 minus x squared. Because when you multiply the same thing by itself, it's the same as squaring, which means the square and the square root are going to cancel, leaving just the 3 minus x underneath. And from here, we just simplify this left-hand side. Yes. So what I did in the next step is I put my 2 identical radicals together and added the numbers in front of them. So 2 root 3 minus x plus 2 root 3 minus x becomes 4 root 3 minus x. And then the square and the radical canceled on the end, so I just have plus 3 minus x. I continue to simplify. I can put the 4 and the 3 together to get 7. And then this is still equal to 7 minus x on the right-hand side. The 4 and the 3 became 7. Yep. Are we okay so far? You what? Yeah. So I'm just going to pause here to make sure we're all caught up before we do the next part. That was the hardest part about this. I truly believe that was the hardest thing that you have to wrap your head around. Okay. That was what was happening on the right-hand side of my equal sign the whole time.
Oh.
Yeah, I just left it off until we simplified. Bailey, what am I gonna do now?
Minus 7.
Which 7? Because I can really only move 1.
Minus 6.
How about I move this one? Because I really am just trying to get that by itself here. So my goal is to move this and this to the other side. Although technically it doesn't matter, like Brandon said. It's just going to be more steps if we move it over here first just to move it back. So I'm going to subtract this 7 over. Is that the only thing I need to move from the left-hand side? What else do I have to move?
The X.
The x. How do I move a minus x?
Add it.
We add it. What do we notice happened when I did that over here? They cancel out and go to 0. So what I have now is 4 times the square root of 3 minus x equals 0. And I can continue simplifying this and solving it like the previous problems. What is my next step to get the x by itself here? question. Is my radical by itself right now? No, there's a number in front of it that I have to divide out. So we need to divide the 4 from both sides. 0 divided by 4, though, is what? 0. So I have the square root of 3 minus x. Yes, you can't divide by 0. You can divide a 0, though. It's okay if the 0 is on the top. It's a no-go if the 0 is on the bottom.
Right.
Because you can't take something and break it up into 0 groups. That's impossible. But you can take an empty box and divide it up into as many groups as we want to. They'll just each have 0 in them. Yep. Okay. I have the square root of 3 minus x equals 0. Kaylee, what will I do next?
Do I do this?
The square?
Yeah, the
Yes.
thing.
Why would I do the square, Kaylee? What am I trying to get rid of or get by itself?
To not do the square root thing.
Right, I want to get rid of that radical so I can get the x by itself. Good job. So the square and the square root cancels, leaving just 3 minus x. And 0 squared is still just 0. Camden, how do I finish this one out? Bring the x over. And when we do, we get 3 equals x. Or you could have subtracted the 3 and divided by -1. Either way, it would have worked. How do we feel about this so far? I want a 1 to 5. 1, no idea what's happening. 5, you could show somebody else how to do it. How do we feel?
I choose the 4. I did 3/4.
Okay,
3
so I'm pretty, overall, it's about what I expected, which is why we're doing a 2-day lesson. So I'm gonna let you work at the homework now, look at the homework now and work on it. And then tomorrow we will finish out the last 5 examples. Yeah.